Hello everybody and welcome back to Anxiety Chats. Today we have another anonymous story, and with us today we have another co-host, Katie. This time we have a story about health anxiety and how it has affected this listener. If you would like to share your anonymous story with us, then head to the link of wherever you're listening to this podcast, or you can come onto the podcast and chat with me in person. It's not as scary as you think. So welcome, Katie.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Looking forward to this one. Something different.
Good. The story we have today is obviously an anonymous story from somebody that has health anxiety, and that's something that you've experienced before.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of have health anxiety to an extent. I think it's almost quite a healthy thing to an extent to have, that you're aware.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can spike and become something that's really unmanageable and difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, there's a healthy amount of health anxiety, but it's when you sort of start ruminating and you can't get out of that loop, that anxiety loop, then it starts affecting other parts of yourself that isn't, the main worry. Like it will start to make you feel nervous, you might start having like stomach issues from it, and it will eventually affect your mental health because you feel like it's something that's so out of your control. And for me personally, it's more to do with hospitals, like actually going there to receive treatment or, have to stay in there for a while. And that's the kind of thing that bothers me. So I've had to start retraining how I think about hospitals. So I've had to say to myself, like, they're a good thing. Like, people are trained and they're actually there to help you. And, it does help. Like, it does, obviously the current situation with everything that's going on, that can make it worse. Because you feel like, well, and I fully support the strikes, but of course, if you do need help, you kind of feel like, well, will there be enough staff there to actually help me? But there are definitely ways. There are like a lot of alternative ways to get help, like calling 111 and things like that.
Yeah.
Just having those in your tool belt, I think, really reduce anxiety. Just having those other options for you. And I don't know if you found with your doctors, but mine has changed to mostly like telephone consultations, like rather than face-to-face. And to be honest, I much prefer that. Like, I definitely think that helps, and it helps surgery as well, of course. So yeah, there are little things that can help with it, but it can be really debilitating for some people.
It really can. And this story is kind of positive because, well, the title is Health Anxiety Turned Around into a Career. So I'm quite interested in this story. I'm going to go ahead and give it a read, and then we can let you know our thoughts. So about a year ago, I had a pretty severe period of anxiety and panic attacks, 2 of which I went to the ER for, and 1 of which I called 911 about, reporting what I thought was a heart attack. Naturally, I browsed sites like Healthline and WebMD rather frequently, cataloguing every single condition I could be suffering from and all the potential things that could kill me. Through this, I gained almost an affinity for medical settings and healthcare. Earlier that year, I had lost my father to cancer. He was a relatively healthy man, and at first he had bladder cancer, which is very survivable. Eventually, after treatment, and it was found that the cancer had spread to his colon, a much less survivable affliction. Eventually, they treated it and he had a colostomy, and things seemed to be looking up. One day, he had some sort of infection and went to hospital for it. 2 weeks later, his organs had started to fail, and that was it. In essence, my thoughts as to origin of my health anxiety is that I watched a healthy man slowly deteriorate before my eyes, and it sort of made me realise my own mortality. About a year later, I've overcome much of the severe aspects of my anxiety. However, I still very much live with more of the passive aspects. Learning to let go of my fear of death and dying really helped. A sort of, if I die, I die mentality. However, I was able to channel this health anxiety into something positive, and I am now in schooling to become an emergency medical technician. Wow.
Oh, amazing. Wow. That's awesome.
It's really, really amazing, isn't it? Like,
That's very good. Oh gosh, well, there's two things I was thinking when you were reading that. The first one is it's similar to where my health anxiety started. So my dad was unwell. He had cancer as well. And I was only 6 at the time. So that was very limited with what I understood was even going on just in life in general. But I do remember seeing him in hospital and him looking very different. And that not being explained to me. And to the point where I asked an adult, whoever was with me, I said, "Is that Daddy?" Because he'd lost so much weight and just looked so different. And I understand that a lot of that is trying to protect the child. But what it does to your brain is very damaging. And I don't blame anyone. I mean, everyone was like my age now. Like, they were all in their 30s when this was happening. So, you know, it was like a lot to deal with. But that was definitely the trigger. Definitely, 100%. And that's also including the environment where he was. Like, so that's a big trigger for me now as well. But the other thing that I picked up from that story is just how resilient this person is and how they've just turned it round. Like, that's amazing. And in a similar way, you're just, you know, finding things that helps them cope with that thing. I mean, I feel like a counsellor or a therapist or whoever can tell you things, but really, if you aren't implementing them in your life, and if it doesn't work for you, you have to find the way that's going to work for you. And we've touched on this before, and I honestly had a really, you know, massive fear of death before. And this person's touched on that in their their mortality as well. And it wasn't until I started looking into like my faith a bit more, I can honestly say that has really grounded me, and it's helped me so much to like not take all of it on myself and just pass it over, and for my beliefs to know what's happening afterwards, because that's what was bothering me. I was like, well, where did Dad go? Like, where do I go, and stuff like that. So personally, that has alleviated so much of like the death side of it, and the health anxiety part has helped a lot. But I think this person has found, it's almost like it's a bit like exposure therapy. That's like kind of what I get from it. This person has found the strength to, first of all, they've noticed where the triggers come from, and they've noticed their behaviours and thought patterns, tried to change those, but then used this experience to then put into action a way to help not only themselves, but loads of other people who will then benefit from their help in the future. Amazing. So amazing.
So amazing. Especially thinking about when this person graduates or works in that field, they will also have such a deep understanding of health anxiety. So if somebody comes to them thinking, I think I've had a heart attack, or, you know, things that are anxiety, they'll be able to better deal with that. Because I imagine in the healthcare system, like A&E in this country anyway, they're very much trying to make people not die. They're not really worried about whether someone's comfortable necessarily. A&E is very much, you know, it's accident and emergency. It's the real severe cases. But this person, I can't remember what part of they're going to schooling to become an emergency medical technician. So that's like, I can just imagine if one of us was ever in that situation and needed somebody like that, they'd already have so much knowledge of how it can feel, and that's such an important part of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Like you said, that's the ultimate exposure therapy, being like, this is my biggest fear. Well, okay, I'll get a job in it, and then I have to, you know, be with it every day, and then I know it's not scary. Like,
it's amazing. And if they hadn't have done that, then that fear would have just escalated for their whole life. It would have just, you know, it would have been fed into, and it only would have made them suffer more. So they've done something so groundbreaking in their life, and taken that pretty awful experience. And it's almost like they're taking a bit of their dad with them in that new experience, because he is, you know, been the catalyst for it in a way.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, really, really powerful.
And another part of this story, her talking about WebMD and Dr. Google, basically, who is just, you know, it's such a difficult one, because it's, as soon as I feel any symptom, the first thing I'll do is like, even if it's a cold, I'd be like, how long does it take to get rid of a cold? Or, you know, quick hacks to get rid of a cold. And I think that's just kind of what we do. But it's like, it's really difficult, because when you're somebody with health anxiety, you can definitely convince yourself you have everything, and that you're definitely going to die. And
definitely.
It's such a tough one. So
you've done quite a bit of exposure therapy, haven't you? I know it's slightly different to this type. How have you found that for you? Like, from the beginning, was it quite hard at the beginning, and has it got easier?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's such a tough one, because if somebody had said to me at certain points in time, like, you just need to face your fear, I would have been like, are you kidding? I can't. I physically can't, you know?
Yeah.
But and like you said earlier, therapy can help so much, and you know, those different things can help so much, but I think nobody knows you better than you know yourself. Nobody's ever going to understand like you understand. And so I think the number one thing before you even start exposure therapy is that you have to be so on your own side. You have to really try your best to show yourself as much kindness and care as possible. And then you can start exposure, because I think exposure can be quite brutal, to be honest. You know, it can be quite like, you're putting yourself in very uncomfortable situations. So I think you need to have good aftercare, good before care. Yeah. That's really important.
That's really interesting that you say that. I think it's quite that's quite a skill in itself, like, especially for anxious people, like, to be able to retrain your thoughts and your mind before you actually do the big scary thing is a huge, massive deal. And the thing with exposure as well is, like, it's not just your mind, it's your whole being, like your whole body. And, you know, it's definitely a physical and emotional experience. So you're doing it with your entire being. So having that foundation before you start, and then afterwards as well, I think that's amazing. You're doing so well. It's really good.
And like health anxiety, like this person has, obviously they've been in situations where they had to phone 911. It felt that severe, it felt that real, that they had to actually, they were like, this is a medical emergency. And so I don't know what, maybe you'd know more, I don't know what exposure therapy could do for health anxiety. Like, where would you start? Where would the building blocks of that be?
I think it depends on what type you have. So for me, it was finding a better doctor that didn't blame every single thing on your weight. Like, it's, you know, especially in this country, I think they're very fat phobic, especially if they're like an older generation of doctors. But changing that just helped massively, because again, it was the fear of going into the establishment as well. Just being in that environment, it's like the smells, the sounds, everything. It can be like a form of sensory overload as well as like what you're feeling. So that helped. And then having doctors that actually understood mental health, whereas like a lot of GPs don't. So that, for me, that's where it started to get a bit better. And then if I needed to go to a hospital, just like you did, I'd have to fully prepare myself beforehand. So this might sound silly, but like making sure I was comfortable. So like wearing comfortable clothes and taking things with me, making sure I had like some water with me, something to read, just really taking care of like every step. Even like making sure I had some ibuprofen if I got, you know, a headache, or that, taking care of all of those things beforehand has made a huge, huge difference. And not just for health anxiety, like going anywhere really. Like I didn't know that was a thing. Like I needed to make sure, I think it's like a safety thing, just feeling safe and like you've got everything under control. And then actually exposing myself, going into the hospital and having that exposure therapy and doing like, being aware of your breathing and like really taking those deep breaths. And I don't know if this is just me, but I mentioned the sensory stuff before, but preparing myself for the smells in hospitals, because I think those sensory things you carry with you. Like because I remember it all from when I was so small, that I'm like, okay, it's going to sound like this, it's going to smell like this, it might be a bit chaotic, it might be this or that. Just that preparation personally helps so much. And then I notice the difference afterwards, like if I come out of the doctors or come out of the hospital, even if it's with someone else, if it's not even for me, it's still the same. I still experience the same anxiety. But because I've taken those steps beforehand, I feel like the exposure is already partly taken care of. I don't know if you find that as well, like you've said about your preparing yourself mentally. Do you then feel like the exposure just goes a bit better?
I think sometimes, but sometimes I can be the opposite and I'm like, okay, I need to leave right this second or I'm not going. So, and then when it's that case, it's kind of like, do I even have my bike lock? I think I can be quite sporadic. But it definitely helps when you know, it's almost like that whole thing of parenting yourself and being like, you know, when you were little, your mum would have tissues in her bag and she'd have like all these things you could possibly need. But doing that for yourself is nurturing. It's self-care. It's like being like, I'm now the mum in this situation and I'm going to hold your hand through this.
Exactly.
I think it's really nice.
It is nice. And it can take people a long time to learn that. It took me a long time to really think about that and learn that. So once we do it, it also, I think it helps our sense of self and like self-esteem. It helps to build that up and know that you are important by caring for yourself.
And I wonder how much it would have helped if this person who in that moment felt like, I'm having a heart attack, this listener, I'm having a heart attack, I need to phone 911. I wonder if that person had information about what a panic attack can feel like and all that kind of thing, they would be more able to relax. Because I imagine now, if this person had a panic attack, they'd know, okay, I think this is a panic attack. I don't think this is a heart attack. But if you don't know that, and all of a sudden you're getting all these symptoms and your heart's beating really fast and you're really hot and you're you know, all of these things, of course you're going to think you're having a heart attack. So I think this is why awareness is so important, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and massively important. And it's a really common thing you hear, that people think they're having a heart attack, like that specific thing with anxiety. That is what people think is happening, more than anything else, really. You hear that more often than, you know, I was shaking or whatever. You know, it's always that heart attack, sort of impending doom, life-threatening sort of feeling. So it would be helpful if these things were brought to people's attention, even just in like GP surgeries, just on the wall. Like everyone reads what's on the wall when they're waiting. Like there should be more mental health posters and awareness in there, and it should be in schools. It should really be anywhere where there's a lot of people congregating, so that the information is just out there all the time.
Definitely, and not thinking you're weird and that everyone else can, because I think that's a big part of it too, is when if you're sitting on a bus, for example, being like, everyone else in here can manage except me. I'm the weirdo that can't even sit on a bus. And you know, it's actually really not the case. Like the amount of people, amount of anonymous stories we've had, guests on the podcast, they're all saying the same thing, that you know, they felt misunderstood, they felt like there wasn't enough information. And the person that's written this is obviously in America, so maybe things are completely different. But I do feel like, from what we know about the USA healthcare system, there's things that definitely need to be improved, just the same as the UK.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the stigma still, isn't it? Like a lot of it has been undone, which is really good, in terms of the stigma. But I think that's something as well that you have to unlearn, because I think that's part of the illness. It wants to isolate you. Like, it will do anything to make you feel like the alien and then lead you into a depression. I feel like that's the end goal, really. And it's something I still do sometimes, but I've gotten a lot better at it by reading other people's stories or listening. But you can it's always like you convince yourself. You're like, well, I'm just like this. How come everyone else can just function? And like, I do that with work. I'm like, I know I can do work, but I just physically can't be in an establishment. I don't know why. And you can be really hard on yourself and be like, well, everyone else can just go to work. And,
Yeah.
and that's really self-deprecating, because really everyone is so different. And there are many valid reasons as to why I've gotten to that point. So I think, like you're saying, that awareness, that's the only thing that can really help. And like listening to podcasts like this and reading people's stories, that's really the only way we can spread the word that like it's and that you're hearing so much more about it now. Like it's so, and also another thing, you're hearing a lot about neurodivergency, like a lot of people with autism or who are on the spectrum. There's so much of that. And because it's a spectrum, some people get just a bit, like they might have more sensory problems than someone else with autism. It's just so vast. And that's the same for mental health problems. Like, you and I both have anxiety, but I don't have some of the things you have, and likewise, you don't have what I have. So really learning, I think, knowledge is power. Like, it really does help everyone, like not just the people experiencing it, but healthcare providers or family members. And my own grandparents, who are from a generation where there really wasn't any knowledge about this, they're starting to understand even their own behaviours and their own things that they struggle with, that have just kind of been put on the back burner because, we don't talk about that, or you don't want to have to, like, they would literally just put people in hospital if they were depressed or whatever, and they'd stay in there, and it was really awful for people back then. But they are understanding it more now, and that's huge. That's massive. Like, in their lifetime, that they can learn that now, that shows that we've come a long way.
Definitely. I have so much respect for people that are from different generations that take the time to learn new things, whether it's mental health or anything, like taking the time to be like, it doesn't make sense. It might not make sense to me, but I'm going to try and learn what these people are talking about. And it's okay if they don't get it right. It doesn't matter about getting it right. It's about trying to understand people. And there's things I don't get, there's things that I'm like, I don't really understand that. But hopefully I'm always respectful, and that's all we can ask for, isn't it? Because health anxiety, this person's story, I can totally understand the panic attacks, but other aspects I might not understand. But like we said, this person, honestly, I just think it's so cool to be like, I think if every single doctor and healthcare professional had some experience, or even, learnt about what we go through, or I think there should be, I think they should have to go through some form of counselling course in order to, like, you're dealing with the public, and the public are all different shapes, sizes, and God, there's just a million different things, isn't there?
And all different experiences as well, like life experiences, personal experiences, like different things that have happened to them that have then caused certain things, like psychological issues. There's, and like you said, like someone going in and speaking to this person who sent the story in, the amount of relief they would feel that they just understand on, like, it's almost like a pastoral level. like just really caring and having that empathy for someone, it's already done half of the job for them. And, you know, that relief they would feel and that comfort would just go such a long way. It's amazing.
100%.
It's incredible. So
the person that sent
powerful.
this in, we are very proud of you. We think this is really cool. And it's, you're going to do really, really cool things. And thank you so much for sending in your story and letting us chat about it. Thank you also, Katie, for coming on today. You've got so much insight and so much kindness that it's just so great to have you on again.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy it. I think you're doing such an amazing thing with this podcast. It's incredible. And like you said, there needs to be more awareness, and you're actually like taking it head on and doing that for people. You're raising that awareness right now. And the fact that it's available in different formats, like that's amazing. Like podcasts are growing. And I think what you're doing is exactly what needs to be done at the moment. And I just want to encourage you to keep doing it, because it's making a huge difference.
Thank you so much, Katie. That's so nice to hear. I really hope so. And I hope whoever's listening to this can feel part of this community and just know that anxiety is okay. We completely understand here. And like I said, if you would like to send in an anonymous story or to come onto the podcast, I'd very much like that. But until next time, I will see you later. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.